360 Info Network, brought to you by the Cleveland Observer. It's a pleasure to be on with you today. As always, we have a great show lined up for you, and we are excited again to announce our partnership with the Cleveland Observer. One of our objectives is to expand our audience. So we'll be doing different kinds of things, more content, new content, things that you may not have heard before, but we don't want to just be about problems. We want to be about solutions. With that, let me welcome to the program our host and the creator of 360 Info Network, Brother Lynn Hampton. Brother Hamptonio.
Yeah, welcome. To manipulate history is to manipulate consciousness, and to manipulate consciousness is to manipulate power. Welcome to the show. Great show for you. It's kind of cool out there today. So, hey, wrap up, put on your sweater. Got a couple things going on around the city. They're going to be discussing that SB1 bill that the governor either had signed into law or thinking about it, and dealing with the whole history, teaching history in our high school students, to our high school students. So that's going on about like noon at the East Cleveland Library today. If you want to go down and participate in that, NAACP, some representatives from there is going to be there as well. And then Sister Francis is doing something over at the African History Museum, I think about 4 or 5 o'clock today. You can call and get some information on that as well. I got one of my good friends from over across the pond in water, and he's going to be joining us soon. But we got, again, in our remote studio, we got our good brother Vince Robinson. What's up? Anything new on your side, Vince?
Well, actually, yes, we are going to be doing the spoken word at Larchmere Arts next Saturday. We have a dynamic poet. Her name is Kim Essence Hunt Edge. She's going to do a solo exhibition, and she's also going to do a performance, a spoken word performance. So we're looking forward to that. And we also have Miss Gloria Cummings Jones. She'll be doing jazz at Larchmere Arts on the 7th of November. So stay tuned, visit our Facebook page, and you will get all that you need to get about what's happening there. And we will be working feverishly to bring more programming to you and to expand what we're doing at Larchmere Arts. Apparently, we are having some technical difficulties on the radio end of things. I'm going to introduce our guest, and then we will continue to work on that. Ghana has always been home to the diasporan community. The West African nation, even prior to the year of return, has largely attracted diasporan tourists who want to connect with their roots, and rightfully so. It's common knowledge that Ghana, then known as the Gold Coast, served as a transit point during the transatlantic slave trade. Several castles and forts still dotted across the country continue to serve as tourist destinations for diasporans who want to learn more about the places their captured ancestors were held and the conditions they had to endure before they were forcibly transported across the Atlantic to work as slaves between 1515 and the mid-19th century. Outside tourism, the West African nation has in recent times become the destination for diasporans who want to relocate. Some have even settled in, started businesses, and formed their own groups. And besides reconnecting with their roots, some are also giving back to the communities they find themselves in by way of education. It is in this regard that Los Angeles native Jerry Johnson and his Ghanaian wife founded the African Ancestral Wall. That is the subject of our show today. So without any further ado, we'd like to welcome Mr. Jerry Johnson. Jerry?
Good morning. Good morning. Had to check the time. I'm always getting a little disoriented. But yeah, good morning, everybody.
Yes, we got you. Yeah, we definitely we want to talk about the wall and too, but we also want to speak a little bit about your experiences and what's going on over on the ground in Ghana, and maybe in that west coast of Africa as well, because they're all connected and starting to link up. Seem like from this end, trying to work together and move and push this thing forward. This, I call it this semi-awakening in Africa, that is seem to, if you tune in, you seem to get, other countries really starting to look at what's going on in the Sahel and the youth is really powering up a movement there. And it seems like historically it always been the youth. If can you imagine that brother Fred Hampton, being 21 years old and doing the things that he done here in the States. So it's always been the youth, and it seems like what's coming true is what I predicted, that a lot of presidents is starting to get pressure from the youth in doing something. They want, change and movement. And so, Jerry, over there on the ground, what are you feeling and what are you thinking is going on with our youth over there?
Well, I agree with that. Young people are always trying to, project ahead on what their opportunities are going to be. I think they're not as naive as a lot of us think they are. They can see what's going on, and a lot of times they don't have so much stake in the status quo that they're willing to turn their head to things. Now, one of the things that you mentioned earlier having to do with the Sahel region, where, of course, AES, which is Alliance of Sahel States, which, of course, is the confederation that's formed between Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, is really getting to be a beacon of hope and light and action for young people around West Africa. And as you could probably imagine, it's hard to, if you're a young person, and especially in West Africa, and everyone is telling you, oh, well, the things have to stay this way because of whatever reasons, the big men say this, or the IMF says that, or on and on and on. Mm. And then they look up next door, or in our case in Ghana, just supporting North, and seeing things happening, seeing things moving, seeing things developing, seeing, the budding industries, and they seeing all. And even if you're in a place like Ghana, a lot of times, if something comes through that port and it's a, major pieces of equipment for building and for working there, big tractors and all the kind of things that, people associate with development. And you see this stuff going through your country to the next country, and then you hear about how they're developing and seeing these things. Of course, young people are going to say, wait a minute, what's going on here? I mean, why aren't we developing? Or, for instance, if you were in northern Nigeria and you're a Hausa or even Fulani or any of the groups up there, and you look just across your border, which is like looking across the street at your Hausa family, people you're related to most times, because a lot of people still don't even know exactly where the border is because they've been borderless and, for how many, millennia. But they see the ones on the other side of the border, things look like they're beginning to happen. In Niger, I'm talking. So if you're a young person in northern Nigeria and you're starting to see things happening in Niger because they've been able to, as we talked before, maybe resecure their uranium output and these kind of things, you're going to say, wait a minute now, that's my cousin and them over there. It looks like they're on the come up. So now you're going to go back and start asking some harder questions and being less tolerable of the status quo and not being as willing to accept all of the old excuses. So I think that is why AES, and we can talk about it more later, but is becoming, is going to be a lightning rod. Not even so much that their development is just going to be so big that it's going to shake the world order, but them be an example of what can be done if the people are determined, and also what can be done when the youth really buy in. So that's going to be noisy and hot in the future, not too distant future, because no one wants that model to work except us.
Yeah, I tried to, I spoke on it when our good brother Ibrahim Traore was actually, doing some great things over there, and we should know through history that he's going to be attacked, and it's amazing to me that you know, people would, go out their way, just because somebody want clean drinking water and want jobs for their community, he would be attacked. And of course, they cutting off their gold, tearing up their gold contracts and want to renegotiate, like Niger did. They was getting paying them 80 cents per kilogram of uranium. Niger, and now the going market is $200 per kilogram. So they're getting in, trying to get the network and things of that nature. But the point I'm making is that it's not an easy road that's gonna happen. You're gonna have some disturbances, and I tried to pre-warn our audience. When you see some little disturbances or something going on, just recognize what's actually happening there. You're taking away French's rental property per se, and they're not going to sit too comfortably about that. And so when you see these little skirmishes or things going on, just recognize it's change. And change usually happen with a little bit of disturbances and uproots. And then, of course, through history, we know outsiders has always had a hand in causing some of these disturbances. So what's your thought on that, Jerry?
Who has had a hand?
Outsiders. People,
outsiders.
Yeah, yes, who had those extra. They had interest in it as well, outside interest. So they're gonna, usually fund, train, and do those particular things in order to cause these instabilities.
Well, I mean, that's why I think we have to pay some attention to just the other geopolitics in the world right now. So, for instance, the West was willing to fund, train, and put together a whole Ukrainian army, from the early 2000s all the way up until Russia invaded Ukraine. The reason I'm bringing that up, but what is that all about? Well, what that's about is Russia has somewhere up towards $100 trillion worth of resources that are under the control of Russia and the so-called East, right? Now, if you're in the West, you want that $100 trillion on your balance sheet, not on theirs. So if it takes you 10, 15 years to train up a Ukrainian army to invade them and hopefully to topple them and do all of these things so you can move in there and move that wealth from them to you, then you're going to do it. So imagine, look right now at Venezuela. Obviously, hitting these little fishing boats and knocking them out of the water. They only have enough, motors to get them a couple hundred miles, and they got to go all the way across the sea to Miami. Obviously, these aren't any major drug boats. What's it about? It's about Venezuela has all of the largest reserve of oil in the world, even more than Saudi Arabia. But right now, that oil and the wealth that it represents is not on the balance sheets of the West. It's on the balance sheets of Venezuela and even probably the Eastern Bloc I call Eastern Bloc, I should say the BRICS bloc, through that mechanism. So you got to get that money on your balance sheet because you, America, are 37 trillion in debt. So how are you going to convince people that you're still viable unless you got all them assets in your hand? Right now, you don't. So these kind of things go on all the time. Iran, why do they want Iran? Is it because they're worried about women walking around with burqas or something? It has nothing to do with it. It has to do with where they are geopolitically in the world, where they're located, not just their oil, which they had a 1953 coup to get their hands on that. But they're worried about where they are, on the Belt Road Initiative for China. Can you go in there and block that? The reason I'm bringing these up is all of this is part of the same story. It's all part of the same tapestry, because when you look at it, what is the whole thing about in, say, Sudan? Well, it's about the gold, right? Right? The Arab Emirates or UAE, are funding one side of the battle in Sudan. to help them get the gold out. Well, why is everyone trying to get the gold out? Because a lot of these currencies are very shaky in the West, starting with the dollar. So people are losing faith in dollars and euros and these kind of things because of their debt, because of their insolvent behavior, so what's happening? They, the West goes in with the UAE, right, to fund the RSF in the Sudan because they're going to help them pull the gold out, which is what they've been doing. Why do they want the gold? Everybody's trying to shore up their economies and their currencies with gold. So, I mean, this is all the same thing. So uranium is just another thing that they want to make sure that they keep on the West balance sheets, because it's been on France, which is part of the West. It's been on that side of the balance sheet and those bankers, and they don't want it to go on the other side. And so they don't want these things to get out. So what's going on in back to Mali, Burkina and Niger, AES, it's really part of the same dynamic, right? They can't afford for all of that gold and everything coming through Burkina Faso and all the rest of the resources. They go into someone else's column because it's been on their column for so long. That's why I said, look at it like a balance sheet, something moving from your balance sheet to someone else's. Well, when it moves to their other person's balance sheet, then, you can't even lend based on your collateral because they got your collateral. So it's all part of the same thing. I think we need to understand it. African people need to understand it in a wider context. So of course, if they're going to, you can almost look at the size of the I don't want to call it resistance, the size and urgency of the attacks, just based on the size of the resources involved. So you got Russia with the trillions. So they're going to say, okay, we got to put billions into Ukraine to see if we can destabilize Russia to get those trillions on our balance sheet. Okay, man, let's look over here at like I said, Venezuela. Okay, that's going to be some trillions. And then look over here in this place, uranium is going to be some trillions or billions, and on down the line. And they allocate that amount of material or political or economic pressure and war pressure, whatever it is. And so the fact that they haven't put as much emphasis on AES in terms of attack, although of course there has been some, I think really has to do with the fact that they're really bound up in some other ones more trillions than just those few African countries, which they still have to get, not only for the resources there, but as I said earlier, for the fact that they're also setting an example, because if other African nations start clustering up into 3 and 4 and 5 countries, and trying to consolidate their wealth and trying to consolidate politically, now Africa is still going to have, collectively is going to have more wealth than all the rest of them people, all the rest of the ones they're going after now. But since they're going to try to nip this in the bud. And there's one way to nip it in the bud, and that's through overthrow. And it's coming. Question is, what's in the mind of the people to stymie it? And it's going to be a hell of a fight.
Yeah, I think a couple things may happen and take place. One thing, I think it was slightly a blessing that some of the things that are going on, but people talk about America as being stretched out all over the globe, trying to put their hands into everything, or they would think they putting out fires, whatever. But we all know it's in the best interest of America for doing anything that they're doing, But I think because of the Ukraine and the Israel conflict, and the election here in the States, and the political fight that Dear 47 is going on and trying to implement 2025, that it kind of given Africa a little breathing room in order to get up on its feet a little bit, or to at least make some inroads to some type of sovereignty and independence from the rest of the world. And the second part to that I think may come into play, that may cause Africa to help with this global shift that is going on, is the investment of Russia and China and India, and even Venezuela into Africa. I believe that they would get to the point of protecting their interests, against America. And I mean, just like Cuba and a few other places that Russia, or communists, have communist values and stuff in their particular countries. So I believe we're setting up a wall here, with China, 1.4 billion people, India, 1.4 billion people, Africa, 1.4 billion, and Russia and some places in South America. So I think this global shift is happening right in front of our eyes, and it's going to be a little tumultuous, a little bit in the beginning, but I think that's where we're headed far as this new global shift. Your thoughts, Jerry?
Well, I agree that there's definitely a global shift going on. That's why you see so much panic in the West.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that the West is panicking not because they didn't know it was coming. They always knew it was coming. It's like when you're stealing, sooner or later, you're gonna get not just caught, but you're gonna end up having to pay for the damage. It's just that, it was so good to them for so long, they just addicted to it. And now that especially China has come up and Russia is coming up and, India and the rest, the BRICS bloc, which, by the way, is not necessarily trying to turn over the whole financial order of the world. They're just trying to make sure that they have their dominant position in it. So this is something that's been coming a long time. But I'm always a little bit cautious, since I live and spend so much time in Africa, about these alliances. I think that the Chinese and the Indians in Ghana, although maybe at the government level back in China, or maybe even in India, see Africa in some kind of partnership. But the feeling you get dealing with these people on an individual basis is that they don't see you as a partner at all. They just see you as someone else to be exploited. Now, that's at the individual basis. Now, from the national basis, I mean, maybe in Beijing, Xi Jinping is saying, we see these people as our brothers. My point there is we obviously need to be looking at everyone and figuring out how we use what we have, how we deal with them, how we leverage them. But but your faith and trust in people treating you, people with power tend to treat people without power contemptuously. That's just a tendency. I mean, it even goes down to personal relationships. So if the Indian in a place like Ghana knows that his government can talk to your government, and your government in Ghana can make sure that that Indian in Ghana is going to get preferential treatment over even the Ghanaian, then that Indian on the ground is going to talk to you with a certain tone, because he knows he's got a nation with enough juice to influence the rulers in your nation to tamp you down if that's what it comes down to. And these people will not hesitate to use that power. That's why, you have to be very focused on building your own national power. And to the extent that you can leverage other people's investments, and even at some level, if there's some goodwill in there somewhere, maybe you leverage that. And that's what people do. I mean, you look at Pakistan and India, you look at all of these, they leverage global power for their own purposes. We have to do the same. So I'm glad that it's happening in a way that the power is shifting from one to another, but having talked to these people and deal with them regularly, they ain't got no love for you now.
Yeah, but Jerry, do you think that you think some of the Africans have learned anything from the past? Do you think that, how it was in slavery, that, you played along with the game and you had, you tried to, survive and things like that, and have them, we start knowing how these people operate. So we played into the game a little bit. So you think our leaders at all learned from their dealings with America and knowing, because I heard, some conversations about them actually, taking China to task, and saying, okay, yes, we're going to work together, but, these contracts and these things is going to be, in our better interest, because we also got to understand and learn that and know that China don't have any bases nowhere on the planet, and also they in Russia either, and they never colonized anybody before. So you think their approach or attention may be a little different, before we go on the break?
Mm-hmm. I think I would say that I think I agree with that. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you have to even ask, people haven't done certain things. Sometimes they weren't even in the position to do certain things.
Right.
That's why they didn't do it. But in this case, I would like to think, and, looking at looking at where they are now, take China, for instance, who's still not trying to expand bases all over there. So maybe they do have a different outlook. So that's why I said our leaders have to have the sophistication and the presence of mind to know that, okay, there may be more flexibility or more room for cooperation here. How do we take that? How do we build ourselves just in case that cooperation starts slipping? And the big powers decide that they want to deal with each other and maybe cut a deal, and you're on the table. I mean, it could be another Berlin conference where, they get together at the end of the day and say, how are we going to deal with these powers? So we have to be building our own power with an eye towards, but I agree that my feeling now is it's definitely better to be dealing with the ones who have not had the history of slavery and colonialism with it than the ones that have, because ones have already definitely proven, their intentions through their actions. The other ones, not so much, but let's just not be naive.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, we're going to take a break at this particular time, and for our sponsor, and maybe when we come back, we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about the what's going on with, if people have the fortitude and wanting to tour and go to Ghana, West Africa, to come and see that ancestral wall, and how you think that is going off with the children there. You think you're really getting something out of it, and from the tour groups and the children's that's coming to visit the ancestral wall, do you think you're getting through to them, and you seen any positive growth in reference to them understanding and wanting to know more about their history? So we're going to challenge that and talk about that a little bit when we come back from the break, and bring our good brother Vince in. I'm sure he got some questions as well, and and continue this conversation. Brother V,
you're listening to break. You're listening to 360 Info Network right here on AM 1490. We're also simulcasting live to YouTube, Facebook, and we have just added LinkedIn to our platform. So we're streaming to several different platforms at one time. Our guest is Jerry Johnson. He's the founder of the African Ancestral Wall in the Pram, Ghana, which is in the vicinity of Accra. We're going to step away and get this message from the Cleveland Observer, our titled sponsor. We'll be right back.
Cleveland has stories worth telling and voices that deserve to be heard. That's why the Cleveland Observer is proud to sponsor 360 Info Network with Vince Robinson and Antonio on AM 1490 WERE, where truth, culture, and conversation come together. Each week, host Vince Robinson and Antonio open the door to powerful discussions, from the arts and community history to the issues shaping our neighborhoods today. And the Cleveland Observer is right there with them, shining a light on the people and movements building a stronger Cleveland. Tune in to 360 Info Network and visit cleobserver.com to read, watch, and share more stories that inform, inspire, and unite our community. Because together, we are Cleveland's voice.
Welcome back to 360 Info Network right here on AM 1490 WERE. Also streaming live to YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We'd like to invite you to be a part of this program. You can go to any of those platforms and utilize the chat if you have a question or a comment, or you want to add something to the conversation that we are having on this platform here on AM 1490 WERE. Back to you, Hamtonio.
Yes, sir. My good brother. How long? When did you start the wall? And what inspired you to do it? And what inspired you to do it?
Well, actually, to go back a little ways, starting in say 2003, 4, and 5, when I first pretty much moved to Ghana, I rented over near the university, Legon, because I wanted to, interact with a lot of the students on the campus. And, I had all kinds of books, all kinds of things with me. And I did that on and off, but I realized really by the time these students get to college level, they drank so much of the neo-colonial educational social Kool-Aid that they were very kind of hard to penetrate, honestly. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you look at the curricula starting from the preschool, basically, I mean, it's all designed to disempower African people. So between that and the religion, or at least the way the religion is propagated, it's all very destructive. So I realized that, I needed to be more effective. I think I should deal more with the younger ones. So I started out in Prom, probably, 2006 or 7, dealing with a lot of students in the villages and, talking about African history. And we'd go give little presentations. And I brought books, and I brought, desk and whiteboards, and, filled half containers full of all this kind of stuff. So we did that I say we, is basically me. I was doing that for quite a while, several years, in fact. And then I realized that, logistically it was pretty difficult. So I said, all right, let me make this wall. That was all the way up into 2017 or so. And then I can just bring the kids in on field trips. And that way I can manage it a lot easier with a lot less running around on my part and, logistics. And that's what we've been doing. Mm-hmm. And that works a little better because when the students come, they're a little bit more disciplined because the principal had to get the money to get together to get the transportation to get there. So when they get there, they're like, no, y'all going to pay attention to this. Plus the children, when they see the big, large drawings, that's engaging to them. Mm-hmm. So it really works well. I haven't done quite as much this year. Part of the travel, we've been working on trying to finish that big library structure we've been working on, which is really getting close. But yeah, that's how I got the idea, and it works very well. Before the break, you were mentioning, how do you know whether or not these kind of things are having an impact? Because sometimes, you get 100 students and they come through and you show them all of the 92 drawings, you talk to them. Afterwards, we go upstairs and talk. Even sometimes, the second floor of the library complex, we can talk up there. But, then they're gone, and sometimes you ask yourself, well, because basically all we're trying to do is give exposure, plant a seed. So someone somewhere else, when they hear something else about African history, African struggle, African brilliance, African leadership, African everything, social, political, and everything else, they heard that something before, because the way it is now, they can go their whole time without hearing anything. I mean, that's how thoroughly debased the colonial education system is in these places. Now, you're going to learn everything about the Queen of England and on, but you're not going to know anything about your people, especially beyond your very narrow surroundings. So just this one little anecdote is that every now and then something makes you feel good. I was somewhere getting some coffee. Some lady walked in with their children, and they started looking at me and smiling and saying, "Oh, he's." So I just figured they must have been through the ancestral wall. Like, of course, I don't remember all the kids. So the one girl said, "Oh yeah, we came to your place with our school," and the mother evidently had been there with them. I didn't recognize her because it'd been some years. And then she started saying, "Oh, how my children," and it got them to be interested in this thing, and we got this book, and on and on. And so they were so excited, and I was like, "Well, that's really nice."
Mm-hmm.
So the girl was about 11, but she said she was about 8 when she came. So I asked her, so I was feeling good about that. She was walking away. So I said, "Well, I have one more question." So I asked her, "Who on the wall do you remember the most, or who made the biggest impact?"
Mm-hmm.
And she was thinking, she said, "There's a girl from Haiti." Now, she didn't remember her name, but the girl is Zabeth, Zabeth. You can find very little about her in history. And she was just a girl who just starting around 9 years old, ran off the plantation, the French plantation in Haiti. And they caught her and they abused her and they beat her, brought her back. As soon as she got a chance, she ran again. And, she's just this incorrigible. So she just kept trying to escape no matter what they did to her, and finally died as a result of one of the later, escapes. So I said, "Oh," so she just remembered that story so well, but she didn't know the name. And I said, I said the name. She said, "Oh, yeah, that's it." So I thought about it. I said, what did you learn from that?" And her and her little sisters are all standing there, and mother's looking at her, and the girl said, "I learned that Black people should never, ever, 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 ever give up." I said, "Okay." And then she went on. So you know what I mean? I said, every now and then you get this little bits of feedback, and you go, "Okay, this is, and that was just in that one thing. So you never know which of the children, could be some that don't even look like they're paying that close attention, are getting something through osmosis, and then somewhere down the line, they do something. We need to systematize these things. I say we should have an ancestral wall in every region of the country, or in every state on the continent, or wherever. There's certainly some that could even go across borders, so the children can understand, the artificialness of the borders that somebody else created for them 100 years ago, though they've been there thousands of years. These kinds of things. So we have a lot of work to do, but that's why we're doing it. And everyone always wants to charge. Why don't you charge the children? Why don't you charge the schools? Why don't you charge the tourists? I said, we can't be charging for the work we're supposed to have been doing for free all of this time. I mean, it's not a commercial enterprise. That's when you were asking me a little earlier, someone, is these things profitable? The answer is, if you're in it for the profit, you're in trouble.
Yes.
The profit is how you see it. So to me, it's highly profitable.
That was a conversation that we were having prior to coming on the air, and I was asking about the restaurant, because I know that restaurants generally operate on a very thin profit margin. But I think what you're talking about speaks to the importance of educating our young people about history, and the fact that an 8-year-old child could look at that image and draw the conclusion that she drew based on
3 years later.
3 years later, have that still as a part of her consciousness. It just speaks to the hunger that our children have. They want to know. I can remember being a student myself and looking in the history book and not seeing us, and I'm like, well, where are we at?
Right.
Because we want to know. It's part of our identity, and we want to understand ourselves in relation to the world context. So I applaud you for what you're doing. I know that there are other places. I'm thinking specifically of Mabel's Table there in Cape Coast.
Cape Coast, right.
Yeah, I visited there a few years back, and I know that there was a portion of a wall in the restaurant area where there were historical figures. And then I remember traveling through Ghana, and we went to another place, and there were walls that had historical figures. So it is something that is gaining traction, but what you're doing there in Pram Pram is so important, and I'm just glad to see that so many people are getting a benefit from it. It's one of those things that you can't necessarily get a measurable impact. I don't know if you count how many people come, and you definitely can't count the minds of the people who have been affected by what they've seen, but you know that it is having an impact. And I think it's probably one of those things that the ancestors bring to us to keep them alive. So as people see these things and they say the names and they see the images, then it just continues to perpetuate their legacy. So kudos to you for that.
It's important to say the names, you know.
Yes.
I mean, it's important for us to remember the names, you know, because all of these names of Aristotle and Napoleon and this and that are in our subconscious because someone recognized the power of repeating the names, saying the names, and we end up getting them. So you got to say the name and hope, and so of course what we really need is not just the names to be spoken and spoken over and over again. We need it to be propagated both far and wide, deep and institutionalized. But and that's what they are back to the AES again. You know, I mean, from all I can gather from people I can talk to who've been there and in and out, is that's part of what they're trying so hard to do, is to institutionalize their history. But part of it is deinstitutionalize, say, the French and European framework from which their students have been being taught all these generations. Mm-hmm. So that's the most important thing. And then, of course, along with that, what you substitute it with is your own story. That doesn't mean you have to throw their story out, but you have to put their story in context to your story. It's just like here in the Americas, right? I mean, you have 400 or 500 Native American or quote unquote Indian nations. And so people are here in Georgia and when they hear names like Chattahoochee or Mississippi or, you know, all of these kind of names, a lot of people, it doesn't even dawn on them that that was the name of maybe some of the native people or they're, you know, and it's all around them, but they've been able to expunge the story, you know, the whole idea and the history of the people on whose land they stole. That, you know, you think Chattahoochee is just some cute name somebody made up in Europe. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't even cross the mind or the consciousness of the children that maybe they're living on something that they didn't pay for.
I think it's really about how Europeans have gone through such lengths to change the narrative. It's like before it was Africa, it was Alkebulan. But how many of us know about Alkebulan? So few of us know about that. When you look at the way the Berlin Conference affected the continent of Africa, they went in, divided nations, changed boundaries, you know, basically redefined the continent. And you can see struggles happening as a result of that. You see these borders that are set up that prevent people from going back and forth. And thankfully, you know, African leadership is doing what they can now to try to push back on those things. But, you know, I think it really just all comes back to history. And you talked about the institutionalization of history. Here in America, I'm sure you know that there's this massive effort to redefine history, to take us out of the history books, to glorify the ones that have been so instrumental in the oppression. And I think you're seeing the same thing on the continent of Africa, where they've gotten this colonialist view of history, but they don't really have an understanding of the heroes and the sheroes of African history. So on both sides, we have to institutionalize this knowledge so that we can redefine ourselves and regain a certain sense of cultural identity. I want to switch gears and talk about money, because in your dialogue with Antonio earlier in the program, you were talking about certain measures that the BRICS are instituting right now. And, you know, when you look at the global scale, it's all about money. You have the Bank for International Settlement, you have the International Monetary Fund, and all these other gatekeepers who control the flow of money, who control the flow of currency, and so forth and so on. The Chinese are pushing this idea of backing currency by gold. We have seen kind of the erasure of the petrodollar that was instituted during the Nixon administration, and now countries are able to come to Saudi Arabia and purchase petroleum with something other than the world reserve trading currency, which is the US dollar. In their effort to back their currency by gold, they're amassing great amounts of gold. It's said that China has about 5 tons of gold. The United States said they have about 8 tons of gold, but of course, we don't know what's in Fort Knox or not. But the fact that you have all this traction going on, and you have these countries that are pushing back on the US dollar as a world reserve trading currency, means that the economic system, the global economic system, is in a state of transformation. And I'm just wondering how African nations are participating in this, because I know several of them are part of the BRICS, and what impact that's going to have on the development of their countries as they push back on the US dollar as a world reserve trading currency, and they get involved in perhaps developing the infrastructure of their respective nations.
Well, back to the gold that you're talking about. I mean, I don't think it's so much that the Chinese are pushing that gold be the basis of the reserve currency, as much as just it's the reality of the fact that what I was talking about just a little while ago, that if for whatever reasons, some of it even self-dealing, that the dollar is losing its position as a reserve currency, and that does get back to petrodollars and all of that. The smart money, is to hedge with gold. So it's not just the Chinese; it's everyone is hedging with gold. That's why it's up over 4,000 an ounce or whatever it is now, because everyone's. So then when they look at Africa, and they look at a place like Sudan, well, who is pulling the gold out of Sudan? Who's on the side of the war in Sudan that is taking the gold out, right? It's the UAE, backed by the Americans, right? Because Americans are looking at that gold and going, okay, Dubai, you guys go down there and, use parts of Somalia, Kenya, whatever you got to do, support the side that is controlling the gold mines, because the people in the U.S. are also the power people are also recognizing that they got to hedge with the gold. Now, they're not going to say it as loudly as the other people, because right now they still want to keep the dollar as the reserve currency, but they're not stupid either. They're trying to make sure they can get hold and control of all of the gold that they can, So now back to the countries in Africa, once again, I mean, who is mining the gold in Ghana illegally? The Chinese. Now they mining that gold so they can put it in a Ghana gold currency reserve so that Ghana currency will be backed and strong. Of course not. They're mining that gold for Chinese wealth and to back the yuan or whatever else it is. If they got to use African gold and their gold and everybody else's gold, however they can get it out of there to back their currency vis-a-vis the dollar, then that's what they'll do. And you know what I'm saying? And so they're not looking and going, okay, Ghanaians, you guys, hey, look, keep your gold where you are and develop it and protect it. We'll help you protect it because you need it. So you're going to need it to back your currency. No, we're going to take it out to our place because we're going to use it to back, whatever means of transaction, non-dollar means of transaction are in the future. That's why I say you have to be very careful. You have to watch what people do, not what they say.
Mm-hmm.
You see, and so whether in your Burkina or anywhere else, you just have to, I think I may have used this analogy before, if you've ever played football and you ever had to, if you're in the backfield and you have to watch a receiver or somebody going out, they always tell you don't watch their shoulders, watch their hips. Because the hips is where the body is going. They can do all this head fake, shoulders everywhere, but they're going to go where the hips are going. So all of these people, watch the hips.
Mm-hmm.
If they dig in your country, do galamsey, suck gold out of your country and send it back to their countries. Mm-hmm. The last thing that they're worried about is solidifying your currency, right? Now, they may later on say, okay, well, we have yen-backed, gold-backed yuan, gold back this or that, more than there are gold back dollars and euros. And then therefore, from African standpoint, we've got to figure out how to line up to what they're doing. But it's our currency is part of what's empowering. Our gold is part of what's empowering their currency. And then we have to go back to them and say, are they going to treat us right? I hope they treat us better than the other ones did. And, we got to go through all these talks about who colonized us when and all of that. Well, that's all fine. But on the ground, they're taking your stuff. And we're hoping they're going to treat you better after they stole your gold than the last guy. Maybe, maybe not. But the real question should be, how are you organizing your power to either stop all of it, or if you're going to do it under conditions that are empowering you.
For sure.
And that's a tricky game. That's not an easy thing. It sounds easy, but it's not. I mean, you look at people like the Turks. I mean, there are masses that play in both sides of the field. But they have a certain amount of inherent power that they built and maintained over the year. I mean, through the Ottomans all the way through. And so Erdogan and these people, they do whatever they have to do, smile at whoever they have to smile to empower themselves. But they built up enough power to leverage both sides. See, and that's what we're talking about. Even Iran, they built up enough power for a while to leverage both sides. But now it's being clear that one side is gloves are off again. So, we have to kind of be multidimensional in how we look at these things. We don't have permanent friends, permanent allies. Some people have, we'll have to see. But when you build your own power, then that obviates a lot of this, dependence, picking and choosing and scratching your head of who's going to be more dependable than who. So, you say, well, both of you better be dependable because we have enough power to cause everybody some pain if you don't cooperate. So I'm not even 100% sure that the Chinese and the rest are just hoping that several more AESs develop, because they're able to take advantage of the Berlin structure, just like anyone else. They can go into Ghana, and the fact that Ghana is a colony, is delineated the way it is, it's been weakened through the Berlin borders. That makes it easier for the Indians and the Chinese and the rest of them to come in and get what they want.
Right.
So they may not be as anxious as we like to hope they are to see several confederate, let's say 5 or 6 major confederated states in Africa, because that's going to make it more difficult for them to, just manipulate that minister from that little country that they can put the pressure on and say, we'll bring your kid to China and give him a scholarship or whatever. Okay. It's getting harder to bribe confederated states who have their own agenda.
Right.
Jerry, we had to be thinking that way.
We're coming up close to the top of the hour, and we're going to have to transition into our online platform. But this burning question is in my mind right now, and that is about the fact that we have the gold, and they say whoever has the gold makes the rules. And the question is, in my mind is, if we have the gold, why aren't we making the rules? Are we pulling this gold up out of the earth and sending it to these other countries to let them refine it? Or are we capable of refining it ourselves and then taking advantage of the gold's value? Because right now, gold is at an all-time high. And by all projections, it's going to radically increase in value. I mean, we're just seeing the beginning of a rise in value. They're having conversations in the United States about revaluing the gold. So right now, $4,000 an ounce. Further down the road, $10,000 an ounce. And with silver, we're seeing even more exponential growth because of the shortages. They don't have enough silver in existence to cover all the silver that's owned on paper. So I want to dive into this, and I want to talk to you also about the dynamic between the Chinese and the Ghanaians, because I know that the Chinese are responsible for a lot of the development of the infrastructure in Ghana, and it comes at a cost. They're not just doing it out of the kindness of their hearts. They're doing it because they have an interest in whatever it is they're building, and that includes roads so that they can get whatever they need to get from A to B so that they can be as profitable as they can. So we'll talk about these things and more when we return in the second half of 360 Info right here on AM 1490 WERE. Just a few announcements before we make the transition. I'd just like to tell you that we are going to have some events at Larchmere Arts that will take place on the 1st of November. We're bringing in poet and visual artist Kim Essence Hunt Ed. She's going to be doing a spoken word performance, and she's also going to do her very first solo exhibition. We're going to hang her artwork on the wall, and we're also going to auction off a painting that she did on the 4th of October in the performance by George Lee Jr. So that's coming your way. And also on the 7th of November, we have Gloria Cummings Jones and her trio. You're going to have Ed Ridley on piano, Elijah Gilmore on drums, and Mr. Bradford McGee on bass. So it's going to be a wonderful evening of jazz at Larchmere Arts. We're happy to bring that to you. Brother Hamtonio, anything that you want to announce before we make the transition?
Yeah, just again, I have the flyer for the African History Museum. That's going to start at about 4:30 to about 9 today. Casual dress, light refreshments. It's called Our Story, and they're inviting all writers and creators to spotlight their work. I think they're going to have a couple authors there talking about their projects as well. So it's today at the African History Museum on Crawford from 4:30 to 9. So if you ain't doing anything, come on down. And then also East Cleveland Library, they're setting it up right now. And they're going to talk about the SB1. I believe it's the SB1 talking about what the government is, the governor is trying to implement in dealing with high schools and our history. So if you ain't doing nothing today, come on down.
All right. Also, just a reminder to those who are listening to us on the radio, you can see us on YouTube immediately following this broadcast on 2 YouTube channels, The Journey by Hamtonio, and you can also view it on my YouTube channel, which bears my name, Vince Robinson. It's so important for you to support us on these channels because what you do to support us helps us support you. So go to the channels, like, comment, subscribe, share this content. You know, Jerry, I'm sure, wants to get the word out about what he's doing in Pram Pram. And if you ever make that voyage to Ghana, it's something that you want to take advantage of seeing. So check out this Facebook page, check out the YouTube channels, and like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you get noticed when we post content. You'll get a notification where that little icon in the top right of your corner says notifications. You'll see something that says 360 Info Network is live on YouTube. Also, big ups to our engineer, Tone Harley. We work through things and we get things going, and he makes sure that we are on the air week after week after week, and we so appreciate him for all the hard work that he does to facilitate our broadcasts. As always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day. Peace.
Peace.
All right.
All right, 12 o'clock noon here in the United States of America, Eastern Standard Time. We have our brother Jerry Johnson, who is actually in America. He's somewhere in Georgia and taking care of some family business, but I'm sure he's anxious to get back to the warmer climates over there, the sunshine and, you know, the blue skies and all the other things that are a part of being in Ghana. Takoradi, I believe, is one of the places that you have established, but you know, you spend time there in Pram Pram, and you're taking care of the ancestral wall, and we've talked about the value of that to those who visit Ghana and to those who are there. So we'd like to continue the discussion. So we were talking about the impact of the BRICS. We were talking about gold, and I wanted to talk to you about the dynamic between the Chinese and the Ghanaians, because I'm kind of thinking that it's not exactly a completely symbiotic relationship. How are the Ghanaians perceiving the presence of the Chinese in their country? How do they deal with it?
Well, I mean, it's a kind of two ways, you know. I mean, Ghana is basically a welcoming society. You know, people are nice. They welcome guests, that kind of thing. But I think, you know, I mean, especially young people, they're very sensitive to what is obvious. And what is obvious is that where they live and where they interact every day, their interactions with Chinese and other people are one of, the feeling that the other people are taking more than they're giving. Mm-hmm. So last time we were mentioning the Galamsey. Galamsey is what they call the illegal gold mining, and just a lot of other things. Now, at the same time, when they see certain development, maybe they're working on a railroad that's going up the country, or even the Japanese who worked on something. Of course, you don't see them much, but I mean, they funded one of the major intersection overheads at right there at Tema off the main motorway. But when you see someone like Chinese doing these other kind of projects, maybe a road project here or there, on one hand, the people are glad to see something happening, but on the other hand, they're also a little skeptical about where's the money going? Because if you bring Chinese, sometimes there'll even be some Chinese workers, not that many, but certainly managers and everything. So you think about it, you say, okay, now the Chinese loaned the money for the project. And when you loan money, you expect your money back with interest. So that if you're a Chinese bank and you think it's a good investment, or you think you'll get your money out of it, even if it's a longer term investment than, say, the West, who wants more of the short term profits, at least historically, you say, okay, so the Chinese banks will get something out of it. They'll hire a Chinese contractor, right? So he's going to get something, he or she is going to get something out of it. And to some extent, Chinese workers are going to get a place to go. Some of their less experienced engineers or technicians can accompany the more experienced ones, and they're also getting training and paid through the contract and all. So sometimes the Ghanaians will look at it, and they may not even think through all of the banking and the interest rates that the Chinese banks get on the loan to do. They might not even be thinking that deeply about it. Just looking at, we know that they got to be making some money here. Mm-hmm. Now, in the bigger picture, some people also ask, so what exactly are they building these roads for? Are this infrastructure? Is it for us, or is it eventually for something they want to do? So you see this Belt Road Initiative that's going from China all the way across Central Asia, all the way into Europe, and then, of course, down right now to the eastern coast of Africa. But are they building a network? They're clearly building a global network. Finance, logistics, transportation, trade. So we once again have to be smart enough to see how much of this are they building for our problems. Because if we sit down, let's say you're AES again, and you're asking yourself, what do we really need in terms of transportation? What directions to go, where to do what? Right now, does that line up with what the Chinese are thinking, the infrastructure you need to go from here to there to do what? They clearly have their ideas of what your infrastructure can be used for in terms of their overall project. Now, to the extent that these things overlap, okay, but who is really making the decisions even about the infrastructure? Now, there's some cases where I'm sure, I was talking to someone about Jamaica. I don't know anything about Jamaica proper, but I guess there's always been a north-south issue of going from north to south, conveniently and safely and all of that. And I guess the Chinese have been in on building, I guess it's a major road from north to south. Okay, now that's something in Jamaica. Maybe the people always said they need it, they want it, and here the Chinese are doing it. Now the Chinese may be doing it, and they're looking, okay, here's some benefit for us, the Chinese, to get something in and out of Jamaica, if it's nothing but finished goods.
Right.
But maybe it's more beneficial for the Jamaicans, and they look at the thing and say it's more of a goodwill project. But even a goodwill project, to some extent, a lot of times is still attached to long-term commercial and power dynamics. So, so nothing is crystal clear. I was told by someone that even some of the some of the railroads and the rail cars and just the whole system in some parts of East Africa, like Ethiopia and some that the Chinese are doing, are not necessarily the Chinese good stuff. You know what I mean? So it says they have these older trains and these things that they built. I don't know if they decommissioned or built and decided, we can't use these because they're doing prototypes of 600-mile-an-hour trains over there now, and certainly 300 and 400 mile an hour already deployed, from what I understand. I mean, I haven't been to China for a long, long time. So they're doing all that. So as far as we know, that this surplus stuff that's just not fitting in their modern infrastructure, and you give it to Ethiopia, Kenya, someone, and it's still good, quote unquote, good enough for them and useful for us when we want to get something from the hinterlands to the coast to feed our overall trade mission. Now, if we get a little better break off, a little better deal for that than we would have gotten from the French or the British or the Americans, I guess that's better than nothing. But we have to be the ones who decide what is the deal we want. You understand? We may look at that stuff and say, you know what? That's nice. Thanks for the change. But we have a program in place across. That's why it's important to get away from these borders, because you got to build enough to have, what they call economies of scale. You know what I mean? There's several countries that are designated countries today. We have to look and say what geography makes sense to us. Maybe the first step is erasing some of the borders. Maybe the next thing is you're going to have to redraw some of the borders until we can get to the next phase. But it's got to be something that's with our industry and our infrastructure in mind. And if it does work well with something else that the global folks are doing, well, maybe we can consider that, as long as it's going to be a relationship that's not exploitive. Unfortunately, part of making sure you don't have a relationship that is not exploitive is to build your own power.
But Jerry, let me ask you
that's another discussion.
Yeah.
But where other people can't just have their way with you when they decide not to be nice anymore, or they have to make decisions between their commercial benefit and yours.
Right.
So all of these things are wrapped up in it. So I'm not one person that just says, if we go this way, it's going to be great. If we stay this way, it's going to be horrible. Well, if we stay this way, we do know it's going to be horrible.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean the next boyfriend going to treat you right. You got to come in there with a stronger hand. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think they're learning a little bit. I mean, the little trickle of information that we're getting over here, we're getting some snapshots of some innovation starting to take place in certain parts of Africa, where people even, they may not have all the tools, but they're making good grounds with what they have.
Absolutely.
As far as robotics, a lot of technology in there,
electric cars.
Electric cars.
I saw in Burkina, they're starting electric cars, manufacturing.
Right. So I'm thinking that, people, some of the heads who may be conscientious about some things are starting to understand to exploit those local, programs like that in order to deal with their sovereignty, and I think that type of wave is starting to permeate a little bit more in the youth and coming up with those things to develop themselves. And I think some of the countries has done well with saying, and dealing with, the U.S. discontinuing some of the aid. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, hardships like that make people do some things for themselves, and they see the vulnerability. And I can connect that to what's going on right in this States, while we sit up here depending on somebody else to teach our kids history. Now you see that anybody can come along and pull the rug off from under you all the time. I mean, every time, and leave you hanging. So I hope we learn a lesson from that as well. But I think, so I think some of the Africans are starting to see that as well.
Yeah, let me just say, once again, I don't want to give this impression that, this sort of, we're in trouble, and we're just dependent and we can't. That's the whole point really here is what's in the mind of the people coming up. You see, this is where socialization, consciousness for power comes in. Because if we are socializing our youngsters coming up to say it is normal to be sovereign, no matter who it is, Chinese, Australians, Americans, Canadians, or German, doesn't matter. The normal state of our affairs should be sovereignty. It should be enough power to make sure other people don't have their way with us to our disadvantage. If we come up with that mindset, then all of the mechanics on how we are going to play one versus the other are going to be, that's going to be our business. They're going to even be successful because we have the mindset that what we're reaching for is sovereignty. That's why the education socialization process is something, because you don't know what kind of techniques these young people are going to come up to guarantee their sovereignty. We're sitting there going, well, don't fall for this, don't fall for that. But if we train them on the right intentions, they're going to come up with the solutions and stuff we ain't even thought about, you know, because technology, they get it. I mean, they understand the communications, you know, they'll come up with something that us three sitting around couldn't even have dreamed of. So our job is to put the intent inside of them.
Motivation.
Their job will be as things develop if they have that intent. It's just like anything else. If you say, I intend to be a surgeon, and that's your intention. I mean, that's what I'm going to do. And you know that at 14 years old. Don't you know you're going to be a surgeon? They're going to say, well, wait a minute, you don't have no money. You can't get no scholarship. You know, so-and-so, you're in the wrong place. You didn't go to the right school. But you're going to figure out how to do that. If that's what you absolutely
But Jerry, don't that inspiration and motivation got to come from somewhere? And so how do we get that motivation, that inspiration? Because I always felt when we talked about earlier, you feel better about yourself, you do better about yourself. That's the importance of your wall right there. And our listeners got to understand, and you made a good valid point, and it needs to be, you know, talked about more about the Africans' education on their own history. We have to understand over here in the States that they have not been taught their history. So with me, before we even, you know, deal with even for finances, you know, because the old saying said, "Fool and money soon depart," right? So my point is attacking our people right here mentally first, you know, and then making them feel better about it. So they have no reason to feel inferior to anything and anybody. And I think that's the first part of that motivation and inspiration of restoring, you know, who you are and what you are. And I think through that, you know, it's almost like the last poet say, what did it say? Free the mind and the behind will follow. So that's why I think about that.
Yeah, was that the last poet or was that Funkadelic? Maybe both. Anyway, but you know, a key word that you keep saying, which I think is the key to all of it, is use feeling. How do you feel? You know, I mean, look, feeling drives everything. How do you feel? What makes you feel a certain way? You know, advertisers tell you all the time, you know, you don't have the money in your pocket, but then they put that Cadillac or that ad on there and they got the brother, he's looking good, going through the city lights on his way to a concert, beautiful sister on his arm. And they say, you made it. So now so-and-so. Now you know, and they know you don't have the money. But your feeling, you know, they're appealing to your feelings. How do you feel? Because that's what's going to motivate you, even if the thing don't make sense. So feeling is what it's really about. This is an affair of the heart. So what we're talking about is so who's going to capture your heart first? You see, I'm always invited to Christmas programs and all of this kind of stuff, you know, in Ghana for the kids. And it never fails. I mean, I get several of these kind of invitations at the end of the year from different schools that maybe have come through. And it never fails. You know, they do the whole nativity scene, and they have children from 2 years old all the way up to, you know, 15, you know, and doing different things, you know, in these scenes. And it never fails at the end. The climax of the whole thing is, all these beautiful black children doing all of this whole nativity scene, the three kings. And then every time at the end, Mary comes out with all of these blankets. This beautiful young black girl might be 7 years old. And then they unswaddle the baby. And here's this big pink head.
No.
Jesus, it's like, every time I see it, even now, it startles me. Oh, what the hell was that? But you see, you got all these little 2, 3, 4-year-olds, and that's God's son. You get me?
Yeah.
Now, these people are feeling that. They're not just seeing it; they feeling it. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, that's God's son. And okay, so it's just doing incalculable damage to the psyche and the confidence and even the ethical, moral positioning of our young people at a very young age. Now they get to, what I was mentioning before, 18, 19, 20, 21, and they're the University of Legon. And they were hit with that at 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, And now here you come in saying, this is who Africans are, and here's what we've done. They're like, yeah, even if they can process the information, their hearts won't agree. And if their hearts don't agree, they're not going to take the action necessary to be sovereign because they don't have the confidence, and at some deeper level, don't even feel deserving. So when you're trying to, you mentioned the word re-socialize. If you got to re-socialize, you're almost too late. That means somebody else has laid the foundation. Now you're trying to break the foundation up and put a new one on it. So you're supposed to put the foundation down. Let them try to change it later on. So these children are in our possession. So before he sees that, before that 3-year-old sees or 2-year-old sees that little pink head pop out as the son of God among all sea of black people in the middle of Africa, that's where you're starting to lose them right there. And then later on, talking about all of this history and what we did in ancient Kemet, they might even believe it, but they ain't gonna move on it because it's not in the soul, it's not in the heart, it's not there. They don't feel it. They may even know it. You can know something and not feel it, and not do anything about it. You can know your child is using drugs, but your feeling for that child and this and that make you rationalize, and at the end, you might not even do anything, because of your feelings as opposed to your knowledge. You start making excuses. Well, I think he was with the other guy, and that roach clip in his pocket because he borrowed the other guy's jacket. You'd be making up all kinds of things because of how you feel about your child, but you know better. Now this goes to everything. So we got African people even now in America who know better, but their feelings won't allow them to move one way or another. And that's what by the way, a lot of what I'm seeing while I'm here, which is this is really quite disturbing, because our people here seem like, well, I tell you what one guy told me, because, I tend to talk to brothers when I see people, but especially some of these brothers moving around, guys like 40 years old, got some good stuff going for himself. And I was asking him about, since I've been here, a couple of friends have taken me to nice restaurants, which I wouldn't have spent my money on, but, they wanted to go and show me. I said, okay, cool. And all of these expensive restaurants, I'm in Atlanta now, just full of black folk. You know what I mean? I'm not going to name any of them, but I mean, just full of black folks. We don't own them now. They own them. And we dropping grand theft dough in these places, spending money like 90 going north, with no ownership, no potential of ownership, and proud to be in there getting pimped. So I'm asking the brother, so what's really going on? Why is, and he said something to me that I had to think about. He says, well, a lot of people had just decided we just ain't gonna get it.
Just gave in, huh?
And so we might as well party like it's 1999. Enjoy what we got. You know, I went to this little park right around here from the corner. You know, and there's a lot of brothers over there playing. There was a softball thing they were playing. I'm not gonna say what part of the town it was in, but it wasn't right in the middle of the hood. And man, I tell you, I've seen so many Mercedes and BMWs and Porsche SUV and stuff I never even knew they had. I guess I said I don't know why I didn't know they had. But you know, all of this stuff at the park with these black folks that got, you know, I don't know what their money is, but all I got to do is look at the statistics in Atlanta and know that we ain't rocking like that. You know, where we all just rolling around, you know what I mean? We ain't got, you know, we don't have proportional wealth in Atlanta, but we got overrepresented in luxury cars and restaurant expenditures and whatever per capita, you know, relative to our wealth and income. So what the hell is going on? And that's what it is. It's kind of like, well, you know, we ain't gonna get it. So we may as well get what we can get right now. And, you know, that's the popular thing, you know, get it while the getting is good and just look the part. Well, that means you haven't been socialized for power at all because you're consuming to make you feel better, you know, about your situation of powerlessness. Well, you're in deep crap when you get to that point. Yeah. So we're trying to obviate, we're trying to stop that. But you're not going to go to that brother in the restaurant who's just laid down all of that money and waiting for the valet to pull his Mercedes up when he got $100,000 in debt, you know, in the back of his head, and talk to him about the things we talking about. He's like, brother, that train left the station. You know, I'm just going to pay this credit card bill and I'm going to be up at that next nice restaurant, at that next nice concert, looking good in my car with my girl. And that's the way it is. Please don't talk to me about all the rest of that stuff because I ain't feeling it.
Right.
I ain't feeling it.
If I could speak to that, Brother Jerry, I think it speaks to the differences in the way African Americans deal with money as opposed to how others deal with it. Because if you look at other aspects of culture within the culture, you know, certain families, they'll pool their resources. They'll get that 2-family home and then rent out part of it and let the tenants pay the mortgage. And then while they're saving money, they save up enough money to acquire another property. And before you know it, 4 or 5 years have gone by, you know. So it's not necessarily about instant gratification. It's about making the sacrifices in order to build wealth. The problem with us is that as soon as we get the money, we spend it. And just as you indicated, we spend it to make ourselves feel better. We purchase self-esteem when we buy those $300 sneakers and we drive that, you know, $100,000, $150,000 car. So, and you know, the oppressors realized this because way back in the 60s, they had campaigns and they were talking about us being the consumers that we are. So we're actually the greatest consumers that this country has ever had and continues to have. And that speaks to the fact that we have to change our mindset around economics so that we can look at developing wealth and not just acquiring debt for the purpose of self-esteem. That's a problem that we have had historically.
Yeah, but you know, I find that discussion to me gets way oversimplified. Not that you oversimplified it, but you know, it's like we're attacking this thing sometimes at the you know, at the symptom level, right? We talk about recycling black dollars. Look, I've been involved with all of this. I mean, I know if you name the person, I can tell you when they started talking about it or if they're even still alive. But these discussions are they're important, but they don't get at the root of the matter. You just talked about these things we do to make ourselves feel better. And so we start making these irrational spending choices to make ourselves feel better. Well, the reason we got to make ourselves feel better is somebody's already stomped a hole in our soul, right? There's a hole in our soul. and we're trying to fill it with something.
Mm-hmm.
So then we can start, so we got a lot of people walking around with holes in their souls being told, how to recycle black dollars. That ain't the issue. I mean, it is the issue. It's the symptom. The fact you don't recycle black dollars because you waste it on conspicuous consumption because you got a hole in your soul. But how'd you get the hole in your soul? Let's deal with that.
That's the
Right.
question.
And we can make sure that hole's not in the soul, then we don't have to spend conspicuously. We ain't got to show nobody a damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not spending conspicuously because you feel again a certain way about yourself, then you're gonna start making these rational choices.
Yes.
You're gonna put them 2 families in there, and then the next you're gonna have a 4-plex over there, and then the next you're gonna spend money with that black company because you don't have that hole in your soul. Because part of the hole in your soul is projection. You're gonna project that hole in your soul onto the other brother, and you say, well, you know what? I better not do business with him because you don't say it this way, but he might have a hole in his soul too, which make him cheat me. Or maybe I just don't even want to see him come up because we both got a hole in our soul. We both feel better if we spend our money somewhere else. Whole lot of manifestations of this kind of, disease.
I think the key word is manifestation. And I think the issue is that we don't remember who we are. If we remember who we are, then we understand the power that we have to create a reality that suits us. But because we don't remember,
that's the hole in the soul that I'm talking about.
That's it.
Because if you know who you are,
yes,
you've been properly socialized about who you are, then conspicuous consumption is not of any use to you.
Yes.
Let the other guys buy trash. Buy your trash. If you're just talking strictly about money and business and finance.
Yeah.
But there's another problem there. And this is what I think when I'm here in the U.S. I really think we have to talk about. Let's just say that Vince, Antonio, and Jerry sat down and we came up with a magic formula and a magic algorithm that all black folks are going to be exposed to this weekend. And after they, saw the algorithm, took the formula or took the pill or whatever it is, they all woke up Monday morning doing all of the things we hope we would do. Buy black, save, respond, all of the things that we say we need to do. Because we're always talking about, we only turn over the black dollar this many times and all of this stuff ad nauseum, right? Okay, but let's say we did that. We all woke up Monday morning, the same mindset. We're going to spend, buy, do that. Okay. By Friday, when the people in power realized that y'all getting ready to transfer 18 I don't know how many trillion is it? 18 trillion. I don't even know the number now, but what they say black people spend every year. How much is it? 1.8 trillion.
Yeah.
2 trillion.
They're getting ready to put all of this in black businesses, black banks, black, or at least 90% of it. These guys are going to go, okay, let me get this right. These Negroes think we're going to sit down here following the rules because see, the black folks be quick to tell you, well, they can't do that. They can do any damn thing they want to. If you ain't learning that now, you ain't learning nothing. So you think Tulsa was a slaughter. You ain't seen it. Try to move them $1 trillion from your side of the ledger from theirs. And you're going to see something jump off bad quick. Because you don't have the power to implement that. The only way you could do it is if they were going to follow their own rules, because by their own laws, they would have to let you do what you want to do. And by their law, by the law of the land, you can't, bomb somebody because they trying to establish a bank or banks, or if they want to move their money here to there, you can't imprison them per law, but you damn sure be sure they're going to do it. Because they're not hardly letting you look. These guys are bombing fishermen off the coast of Venezuela, pretending they got something to do with drugs. Yeah, what make you think they're going to sit there and let all y'all sit up and do it? It ain't going to happen. The reason it doesn't come up is because we ain't had that pill or that algorithm to even approach the issue. But if for some magical reason we did, you're going to find out what power really looks like. And they're going to shut your ass down right quick. Now, I hate when I say this, people go, oh, you know, Jerry, you're so defeatist. You think they got all the power and we can't do anything. I said, that ain't got a damn thing to do with it. I just know where power is. And you're naive if you think once you organize all of this stuff, they're going to go, oh, you figured this out. You're recycling black dollars. Damn, we was hoping y'all didn't know. Okay, go on, buy all the, you know, go on, buy 13. You don't take 13% of the country's wealth now because you've organized to buy the damn gold, you know, the oil field off of Texas because it looked like y'all got the money to do it. Go ahead on, it's for sale. It ain't for sale, you Negroes. I don't care how much money you bring. And see, that's the problem we have because we keep trying to tell our people that there's some magical formula and there's a do this, that, and the other. It's all going to be all right. You don't have a nation. That's your problem. You're nationless. Nationless. And you want to pretend that the problem is that you didn't manipulate inside the nation that someone else owns and controls. This is foolishness.
And to deal with that foolishness thought is something that we kind of briefly talked about the other day about if we thinking that, you know, if we convince them that or the powers that be that they're okay, show them all their deeds, their dastardly deeds that they did over the centuries, that they're gonna say, hey, you know what? You're right. I'm gonna bring you in half. We're gonna set this record straight. And that's what I do. Even if I'm talking about all this convincing that we trying to convince them, and through history, look, you guys had the last slave thing. You did this, you did that, and if that's gonna change and make them give up some power because they acknowledge, well, you got me. Yeah, I was wrong, and now
I mean, look. I mean, we don't have to talk about it in a big macro sense like that. Let's talk about the micro sense.
Okay.
All kind of stuff happened to black folks. We got it on tape. We got it on tape. You know, they saw the man. They shot the man. Us on tape. And white boys walk. You see me?
Yeah.
So that's just at a micro level. But this is what you're talking about. We got it on tape, but they got away anyway because the people who control the system decided it's not really a crime. Your life is not worth that. So we got all this stuff on tape. And that's why, as I was talking to Antonio the other day, I was saying, look, you know, all of these very, very good meaning black people in America, I mean, they love black people. I really do. And I was do some names, but I wouldn't name, you know, the people in America that love black people. But somewhere they got still got that chip that says reform is possible. Now, they're not looking at all of the scams these people are pulling on one another. You know, you think these guys are building all these alligator Alcatrazes and all this stuff all around this country, you know, just for you? Just for the Latino? No, they're looking at their own men and going, these guys are gonna also rebel because they're fighting age men with no jobs and no future. They're gonna raise hell. We better hire as many of them we can and put some kind of shirt on. DHS, ICE, something. Just give them a job. Give them that $100,000 salary, that $50,000 bonus. We're promising. Just get them. What? Reserve. You can be in the reserves. What? Get as many of them on your side as possible. Right? Because those are the guys that are going to fight you. I'm talking about, this is the 1% talking now. This is not, you know. They looking at the other whites as like, these guys are going to blow up. So how do we co-opt them? MAGA is about co-opting them. So for a long time, you can use the boogeyman of Black progress, DEI, this, that, and the other. But there will come a time when they're going to realize DEI ain't the reason they're not eating. Because everybody they see black is in trouble. I contend one of the reasons they keep a lot of these black figures on TV, MSNBC and all of these names and all of these, is to give the impression to the country that black people are doing well. I'm talking to the whites in the country, that, you know, these blacks are doing well, right? Because if they understood the reality that they losing ain't got a damn thing to do with us, but we lost first, then they wouldn't be able to focus their minds always on us. You see, anytime something goes bad, something's getting sticky in this country, you know, they're gonna indict Letitia James. You know, it's always something to raise the black flag, to get the majority of whites, who, by the way, always vote for the Trump type people, to get them exercised again. Oh yeah. You know, the blacks, Haitians ate some dogs. We got to send them out. Oh, we got to fire this black general. They always got another black problem on deck to propagate to the white masses, to keep their minds clear that the problem is black. They're motivated by anti-black sentiment. That's how they've been programmed for 400 years, right? So while they're looking at all of that, they still steadily getting robbed. But this, you know, no lie can last forever. At some point, even though anti-black sentiment is the gift that keeps on giving, there's still at some point where everybody black they see is down, irrespective of what they keep seeing on TV. And they're going to start looking around going, somebody else in our pocket. So they're staving that day, but they know they can't put it off forever. They got $28 trillion, $38 trillion of debt, all of this stuff coming to a head. They know it's going to come to a head. So they gotta prepare for that. And they are. But I'm saying all that to say, in the environment where they're preparing for pulling benefits away from their own people, I mean, they cut all these billions from Medicaid and this, that, and then making insurance premiums skyrocket and interest rates where people can't get enough. Those white people can't pay that insurance. White people can't get that house refinanced or buy that first house. These are white people with no health care, you know, all of that stuff. That's them. So the people who set that up know that the majority of whites are going to finally say, oh, man, wait a minute, this bullshit here. How many of them can we buy off with these jobs, DHS, ICE, and all the rest of it? Okay, the reason I'm saying all that to say they got to go through all of that to deal with their own people. Now, what in the hell makes you think that when you come with your moral, ethical presentations about what happened to you in history, and we got it on tape, what the hell makes you think he going to give something back to you? You're the last of his concern, and you're the last that he's going to give it. You know, you're not even in the equation. He got the mobs to worry about. And he feeding you to the mob right now. And then when he's done feeding you to the mob, he still got to deal with the mob. Now you're going to get reparations in the middle of all of this? White boy don't have health care? Come on, knock it off. I mean, I don't know what kind of game we're playing here. You know?
Yeah, well, you know, Jerry,
I listen to all of this and just shake my head.
Yeah, you know, they're in the street.
Black dollars. Negro, what?
They're in the streets right now. If you look at what happened in Washington, D.C. last week, and social media is exposing it. You know, the 1% that control 99% of the media, they're not putting it on MSNBC and CBS and NBC and all the others. But when you plug into social media, it's people in the streets, and it's not just us. As a matter of fact, it's more of them than it is of us. So, you know,
that's what's coming.
Yeah,
that's gonna blow up. Nobody's gonna have time to deal with your problem. Look, in the 60s and the 70s, after World War II, America had all the money, all the power, everything. They had industry. You know, white boy could get a GED, not even get that, and through nepotism and the size of the manufacturing base, could find something, feed himself, feed his family, buy a house, take a vacation, and pay for his kids to go to college on that one salary. Then they had to get the wife working. Of course, we always had the wife working, black folk. And then they had to go into more debt. They had to do all of these things to keep up. And then at some point, there's just nowhere else to turn. They just can't get that lifestyle. So that's what's going on now. They're living, looking back, realizing somebody screwed us. But the reason I'm bringing that up is that back when things were good for them, that's 50s, 60s, going to 70s, so getting shaky in the 70s and 80s, they had a little bit of empathy. You know what I mean? Okay, Civil Rights Act and some voting rights and maybe a little bit of affirmative action. Nothing big, maybe in the lower level jobs, maybe a little more union representation. You know, just showing black folks, I wouldn't even call it no love because they still keeping all the wealth.
Mm.
But they just opened up the income stream just a little bit, gave you some of these nice government jobs, you know. Black folks sitting in D.C. is a GS this, GS that, got the biggest car out there, talking all kind of trash, you know. And then Trump come in and say, you know, we take 300,000 jobs from black women. Wait a minute now. You know, I mean, you know what I mean? This is just little stuff they threw at you to kind of keep you, you know, a little bit pacified, even though, like I said, they were never sharing any real wealth. But those are the quote unquote good old days when they were doing well and they were reasonably comfortable. They're not doing well now. They're not comfortable now. They're in panic. Now, what make you think you getting ready to come appeal to their reason to get your piece of the action? It's not going to happen. So then, okay, well, I could go on and on. So I'll let you, you know, because I have a lot of stuff in mind that I've been observing, you know.
And so with that being said, then, okay, when we talked about solutions, I mean, we didn't talk about any solutions. Like, you know, in summing up some of the conversation, I'm looking at, it seems like we're on agreement that, you know, a mindset have to be reset in order for black folks to move forward. And I say couple that up with a culture which gives you a way of life, a sense of glue that pulls the people together for their own self-interest. And, you know, like Dr. Claude Anderson say, look at race as a color. I mean, stop looking at race as a color, look at it as a competition, meaning that the Asians trying to get as much as they can, you know, and so it looks like we are working together on that. So in order for that to happen, it definitely have to have a mindset reset, you know, in order for us to do that. Now, for some, like myself, you know, if we ask that question, is these people in this country going to ever turn over power like that to black folks? And I think that's what you was kind of surmising and coming up, that it's basically under these conditions, that's never going to happen. So
what do we do?
Yeah, that's the question.
That's where we're going, right?
That's where we're going. Yeah.
Okay, because I love Claude Anderson, read all his books, know what he was doing, you know, the whole time. Okay. I don't know if I read all his books, but I certainly read, you know, the popular ones back in the late 90s and the 2000s and whatever. But that's what I was talking about. Let's say everybody read Powernomics, or everyone read, you know, whatever the other ones are. We all got that in our heads Monday morning. We're going to go off and do that. Okay. It ain't going to go down. It might be better to some level, up to the point where they decide we got to shut this off. You see, and they can't do that to the Chinese. This Chinese got a nation. You know what I mean? Look, remember when they started some years ago, there was a little outbreak of anti-Chinese violence. Remember, there's a few Chinese people and I was saying at the time that ain't gonna last till the end of the year, or maybe not even the end of the month, because the Chinese, you know, the Premier China go pick up the phone and call somebody over and go, what the hell's going on? Well, we're having some anti-Chinese sentiment, and we're having. I see. I said, let me tell you something. Y'all don't straighten that up by, you know, noon next, you know, 3 weeks, noon next Wednesday, or 3 Wednesdays from now. You're going to lose about 400 people 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Hong Kong. They're going to just vanish. Not cut it out. Stop it. They got power to call you and tell you, because we got a nation, and you can't treat the representatives of our nation any kind of way you want, even if they're on your soil. See, we don't have that. That's why it's in getting back to nation. So when the Chinese recycle black Chinese dollars, or the Koreans recycle Korean dollars, they're still doing that in the context of a nation. Right. I remember living in LA, the Japanese, I remember they were talking about these guys. barely had written contracts. A lot of the, big deals going back and forth. They were talking about it on one radio show or something. It was an article, I think. Mm-hmm. And that was because back home in Japan, it's like if you got the reputation in Los Angeles of ripping off another Chinese business in Los Angeles, all kind of hell gonna break loose. You don't want to be the guy or the group or the family or whatever who's got a reputation of cheating the next one. Not only are they gonna blackball you from any business in Los Angeles or in the US, even your people at home gonna have problems. So don't you dare. So they didn't have to write all this down and have all these lawyers and spend all that. It's culture. They got a nation, and you behave within the constraints of the culture of the nation that represents you.
Yes.
See, we don't have that.
Yes.
And if you want to say African Americans are quote unquote a nation, I can argue about that. I don't buy that. I think we like to see ourselves as that. Maybe it's convenient. Maybe it's a way of just distancing ourselves from Africa. We don't need Africa because we got a nation. You don't have no nation. People can do with you as they please because you don't have a nation somewhere on this earth. This is what Garvey tried to explain. I don't think people were listening. They just think back to Africa to do what? So now back to what I would consider solutions or, things we can be doing. Okay, I got Brother Vince Robinson here, right? Brother Vince got family. He's got allegiances. He got hundreds of apartment units. Is it hundreds, Vince? Yeah. Hundreds of units you got?
Right.
You got hundreds of apartment units that he's trying to manage in America. All this money. Now, he's looking and saying, no, wait a minute, you think I'm getting ready to pull up and go to Africa right now? My mother's not feeling well. My son is, all of these real life connections. We all have them if we're alive. So it's not practical for me to say move to Africa. Because the reality is really just, we can talk what we want, but there's certain practicalities that for some people, and it usually has to do with, deeply has a lot to do with families a lot of time and their people and their, just their family. It's not in a position. My daughters, whatever. Okay, but once you decide that Garvey was right, once you decide that there has to be power built on the African continent. To represent you or to represent your grandchildren, it may not happen that quick, to where they are plugged into something powerful so they can't be abused anywhere around the world. Once you decide that that is necessary, even if you yourself can't necessarily go, this is a big world. It's a connected world. It's all kind of stuff you can still do. You can, of course, visit to look around to get your bearings. We need curriculum. We need, people with audio, video capabilities like you all have, as documentaries, now we can put documentaries in all kind of languages. You could be right here in America saying, look, we're going to pick, maybe you're a documentary filmmaker. You say, okay, we're going to do something on African history, or we're going to do something on African culture. We're going to do something on Pan-Africanism. We're going to, whatever it is that you think these young African origins of spirituality, whatever it is you think that, we need at the level to socialize our people in the beginning. But I'm tied up here in New York or Cleveland or whatever, got to do this. But I'm good. I can do video and stuff. Now you can look around and say, you know what? If I do this thing on Garveyism or Pan-Africanism or African history or culture or music, doesn't matter what it is. Let me see if I can put this into do the thing. And now let me choose 3 languages, right? Zulu, Yoruba, Wolof. Or Tree or whatever. I'm just saying. And we're going to go now, especially with AI. We got all these kids that can do it, with just like that. And we're going to put this history in these languages, so they can be listened to in the villages. Because the people in the villages ain't reading English. A lot of them. A lot of the kids go to school. A lot of them don't. A lot of them never get really proficient. A whole lot of stuff, but they understand their home language. And then they can listen to with their grandmother and their mother and aunties out in the field somewhere and get that thing.
Okay.
You understand?
No,
so you could be sitting right there in Cleveland and do that. And that is a contribution to the consciousness that we're having to build on the African continent. Say nothing of our children here to feel like they're belonging to something. There's nothing stopping us from doing that. There's nothing else from stopping. So when people say, well, it's either or, it's not either or. It's and. You can take care of your obligations to the extent. And some people just say, look, for my own personal reasons, I eventually would like to live in Africa. Because I can tell you, I came out of LA and I wasn't starving by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I had what other people consider a pretty good life, materially. But I like Africa more. The day I went, first time I was in Senegal, I was like, I'm moving here, because, it's just that feeling, you just part of the thing and you just like it. Some people don't. Some people say it's too many black folks, so I got to go back. Well, those are people who you can't do much with at this point. But my point here is that people can be planning. So at this moment, I can't even go. Or I can maybe only go once, but once I buy into the idea that Garvey was right, where's the black man's government? Where is our power? And that power necessarily has to be on the African continent because that's where we have the land, the population, and the resources, none of which we have here. And you buy into that, just like I was talking about the children, once they determine that they're supposed to be sovereign, then they're going to figure out the route to get there. Once you decide this is the way that we have to go, and that your grandchildren are going to benefit if we start now, then you'll figure out how you can make that contribution. And in some cases, you may decide that your contribution has higher leverage if you're actually there, which is kind of where I am. I'm saying if I have 100 children, 1,000 children in front of me, and 1,000 are here in New York or Atlanta or DC, I have 1,000 children in front of me, and they're in Dakar, Senegal, Accra, Ghana, and Johannesburg or wherever it is, or Nairobi. I feel like those 3,000 children in those three cities on the African continent, properly socialized, are going to have a bigger bang for the buck, and are going to be able to do more in terms of building the national power we're going to need on the African continent than the children here. Now, that is obviously not to say that we shouldn't be doing it with the children here, because we should, because what we're trying to do is a global movement. Those children, but you have to be honest, they're not really in the position, right, here on the soil to effect the kind of change for global African power as the children on the soil are.
Right.
So it's just a higher leverage activity. I mean, I'm just looking at it practically. But the ones who are here get it. That's good too, because what's going to be on their mind? How to
connect?
To either be or contribute, to connect, build, strengthen, whatever it is, from where they're standing.
Right.
And some will come up and start manipulating inside the system. Some will get outside the system. Some will go global and be sitting over in Thailand somewhere scratching his head saying, what are we going to do to empower these Africans at the AES from my little perch right here in Thailand for whatever reason I'm there? So it's about the mission, and it's about the commonality of purpose. It's about consciousness and feeling. If you don't have those, then you're just going to be thrashing around hoping that, you can change Charlie Kirk's followers' minds. Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, I so appreciate what you just shared with us, because I think it demonstrates the fact that we can do what we can do in our respective places, and I think it's a matter of everybody pitching in to do what they're capable of doing to contribute to the common good. As we conclude, I just want to emphasize the impact of our young people. We're looking at Burkina Faso and a leader who's in his 30s. And obviously, he has a different mindset from those who are in their 60s and 70s and 80s and are still responsible for nations that have ties that extend to colonial powers, so to speak, in Europe, and are enabling them to continue to affect their agenda. But I think that there has to be a change in leadership. There has to be a change in the mindset of leadership. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're seeing the turnaround in the AES as you described them. So I think that the hope really does lie, and I'm not going to use hope, I'm going to say the trust. The trust lies in the younger folk who can leverage technology, who can leverage their understanding with what they get from the elders to make a significant change in things and see the restoration to power of African people on the globe. Jerry, I want to thank you for joining us on 360 Info Network.
All right.
You have given us a wealth of information and knowledge, and it's just refreshing to hear your perspective, because from your seat over there on the other side of the globe, you clearly see what's happening here and there. And I think that's really what provides a benefit to our listening and our viewing audience, because they can see things from beyond the narrow vision that we have here in America. We have to make this connection to Africa, just because, as you mentioned, the resources, the people, the history, and all of those things. I think it really does come back to us remembering who we are. And you are descended from the strongest of the strong. The strongest of the strong. That's who we are. And so you can leave that lush life that you were living in Los Angeles, go to Africa.
I didn't say lush now.
Well, you said you
don't overstate it.
You said you were comfortable, and so you understand.
Materially comfortable doesn't necessarily mean psychologically.
Well, obviously you're more comfortable where you are there than you are over here in America. So,
yeah.
Well,
I thought you were talking about Los Angeles.
And in conclusion as well, this is I think the meat of it. We have to overcome all the negative propaganda that we have received about Africa and making that connection. That's the only reason. If you had marketing campaigns in this country that said there was something good about Africa, something good about having African blood, we'd all be talking about the percentage of African blood and want to be African. So that negative propaganda has caused that wedge of disconnection. The sooner we get to the point of understanding that Africa is our salvation, with the resources, to me, that's the only thing that's going to give us some economic power, strength, and things of that nature that we can leverage for our benefit. Where else is you going to get it? Over here in America, just being consumers, you don't manufacture nothing, you don't make it. I go back to what we just said. They can pull history books right out the classrooms, right in front of your face, and you ain't got nothing. Those billionaires, Kanye and all the rest of them, they can shut you down in a moment's notice.
And they've done it.
And they've done it. They showed you they can do it. So when you go self-preservation, sovereignty, and all those things, and for you to get the wealth that you want, far as a nation is concerned, you're not going to get it here. Africa is the salvation, is the connection. And sooner we learn that, the better we are going to be as a people.
And let me just say one thing for clarification. That when we say a nation on the African continent, don't even worry about how they're cut up right now. Don't worry about the Berlin walls. Don't worry about the borders that have been imposed on us by someone else. The nation has to be what we decide it's going to be, what is functional for us. You understand? So people like AES are just breaking down a couple of the Berlin lines, but they're still, the outside lines are still Berlin lines. So, but we have to, but that may be the best way to do it in the meantime, in the interim, do what you can, but we have to decide how that continent has to look to be functional and productive and safe for us, by us. And those old colonial lines are just, they're temporary, and we have to see them that way. That's why I try to present something to say, if you have to be here, because people always keep seeing this as like, oh, you saying I got to go to Africa. I ain't said that. No, I understand people have are different places in terms of their mindset and obligations. So but once you decide that that is going to be what solves the problems you just said, Antonio, then you use your own imagination on where to fit in and where to contribute and what to do.
Good point. Mm-hmm.
If you could, before we shut things down, could you just tell the folks out there what AES is?
AES is Alliance of Sahel States. Now that AES is the French acronym. A is Alliance, Alliance. E is state. And I think they call it Etu or Este, something French word, and the SAES, Sahel.
Okay.
So it's Alliance Etu Sahel, something like that. We call it Alliance of Sahel States.
And if you
acronym.
could,
when we say
let 'em
AES, what we're really saying is Alliance of Sahel States, but AES is the French
version of that. Mm-hmm.
Right. And for those who don't know what Sahel is, define that.
Sahel is just a region in Africa running from, let's say, where Senegal is, and it's right on the border of the desert, the Sahara Desert to the north, and the more lush or the more green to the south. So it runs from Senegal all the way across through Chad. And I think the word Sahel actually means shore or something in Arabic or whatever it is. So they saw that as the shore of the Saharan Sea. So if you look on any map, you'll see it will say Sahel region, and you can see, and it goes from east to west, well, west to east, east to west, and not north and south. So for instance, you can be in Ghana. If you're living in the northern part of Ghana at the border, you'll be actually right in the Sahel region or right in the border. If you're in the south of Ghana by Accra or down where we are, you're not in the Sahel. So a lot of nations have the northern parts in West Africa, the northern parts of their nations are actually in the Sahel region, and the southern parts are not. But that's just, once again, that's just a function of how they drew the line.
Geographers. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, which really should anger us anyway, that we're still, trapped into this thing, and we're fighting among each other inside of Ghana with these political parties that are more dominated by this group or that group. I mean, the whole thing is just so. I don't tell people to come to Africa because we're ready for prime time right now. I say get involved with Africa here or there so we can be ready for prime time.
Okay.
A lot of work to do.
Well, on that
Children
note,
will do it for us if we give them the gift of our energy, love, time, socialization. They'll solve the problem.
On that note, we'll conclude today's broadcast. And again, thank you for joining us. Final word, do you want to mention, Antonio, before we part ways?
Yes, no, just our history, our history and culture. Our ancestors are waiting on us to show us the way. And the sooner we do that, the better we'll be as a people.
Okay.
Right.
All right. With that said, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day. Peace, y'all.
Black power.
Peace.